and 80s, we had a thing called sound systems. You would have speakers the size of wardrobes. The speakers would have been about 18 inches wide, and you would want more and more bass. The thing at the time was H&H amps with massive Celestion speakers. So we did a lot of that. So you had to build them and then test them out. I played at a place called Bellington. It was like a thing there, I think it was like Sojourner Truth, the original Sojourner Truth. And it was in a room you could go in and you could just, test out your stuff. But eventually, the music, you weren't allowed to play there because people didn't like the noise across the road and stuff, so we had to stop doing it.
Did you play?
It was roots. It's a turntable. Yeah, so it's like you would put sort of like it's roots reggae. There was some lovers rock and stuff around at the time as well, but I wasn't really interested in that. I loved the roots music. They had stuff like the Twinkle Brothers, and Prince Lincoln and the Royal Grasses, my thing. I grew up on the North Peckham estate. I lived there because my mum moved there, and didn't really have any choice. I had to go where they went. The estate was like a building site when I moved there. They hadn't finished it, so when we used to play in the dumper trucks and stuff, and barrels of they'd leave the barrels over the estate, and we had all these like metal rods. I wasn't sure what they were at first. They were like grids of iron that they left. There was hundreds of them, so we used to get them and bend them. The house, it was mainly concrete, and it was mainly grey. There were some bricks, and they had these landings, walkways that you could just walk from top of Peckham, right away to like Elephant. If you had a bike, you could literally go from the top of Peckham without touching the ground, going across Camden Estate at the front of Rye Lane, then coming right away through the North Peckham, going down over the North Peckham by the laundry, across the Camden Bridge, down to Quorley Way, then heading to Hordle Promenade South, then going across into Gloucester Grove, connecting via a bridge, and then riding across into Aylesbury, and all the time you're in the air. It was just crazy. Community were pretty tight together in those days. Had a lot of people, community activists. They used to get us to go out on the streets. Young socialists. You'd deliver your papers. You'd get on sort of like I was on panels for. I was originally on Sojourner Truth, getting involved in political discussions, lobbying the decision makers and stuff, early on, making sure that, we got a little something. So it was like that at those times. You had to be involved in something, couldn't just, watch it go by. You would need to protest about certain things that were wrong at the time. And, we played in the football teams. Football teams were run by, we had a tech football team, had a Bells Gardens football team, where you would literally play three, 4 times a week at the Tech, and then you'd go out and have a match on a Sunday. We would have to raise our own money and pay for it ourselves. You'd have to go out, do a little work and pay for your subs and other things. Also, when we went to youth clubs in the old days, you'd have to pay a membership fee. And if you didn't pay your membership fee, you weren't coming in, And it was the place to be, All the youth clubs and stuff. It stopped us from being out on the roads and stuff. And, some of our friends, they got into trouble and stuff, but we got in a youth club so we were safe, so we didn't get in any problems. Yeah, because I was in youth clubs, I was in the youth clubs from I was about 7 years old. So I got in early because my brothers were older, and a guy called, I think it's Dave Barrow and Stuart Thomas at the Tech. I ended up being a youth worker. I was in youth clubs from I was 7, so I got let in by Stuart Thomas and Dave Barrow at the Tech, where, because I had my brothers, quite a few of them already in the club, so they let me in instead of me hanging outside for like, just a year. So I got in, and then, I liked it so much. I thought, the people in the youth club, they would help you with absolutely anything. There were a lot of kids in a lot of trouble with different things. You'd get into trouble. There was a couple of kids that got, in my time, first thing I remembered was they were on a shop front and they were breaking in, they got caught by the police. And the youth workers, supported them through all of that, which was really harrowing for them. They were constantly crying, thinking they were going to go to jail. And, I remember how good the youth workers were at the time. Those guys in there were fantastic. And I thought, I want to do that as a job. So I then volunteered at 14, and I was in a junior club at Bell's Gardens, I think, at that time. And then at 16, I got an opportunity to work for the Inner London Education Authority, which is ELIA, the old ELIA. And so I did that for a while, and then I got asked to do a youth work job, which was sort of like 2 months later. So I was 16 when I started. Mine, I remember, before the riots, I remember sort of like a few incidents in Peckham that were building up to it, where there was a fun fair, and I remember coming back down Rye Lane and people were just going mad, smashing windows, shaking cars, throwing things at the police and stuff, and it was pretty scary at the time. You just thinking, what's going on? What happened? And I tried to make my way down Rye Lane, but everything got onto the estate by the time I got there. People were in Camden just running into people's houses, kicking the doors off, coming out with stuff, screaming, shouting in the street. And then it got a bit nastier later. Apparently people throwing petrol bombs, tipping cars over down by, I think it was St Luke's. And as a memory, it was quite scary, because you hear a lot of people just all like not sure about what they're doing or what's going on, and I think with just a lot of anger from the stuff that goes on. At the time, a lot of those young people were stopped regularly, and I used to get stopped, and people used to say, "What you got?" And you say, "What you got under your hat?" And you say, "Hair." And say, "All right, sunshine, come with us." So you'd end up in the police station, being stripped naked, and people searching you. And it was like, I think back in the day that happened a lot, and you kind of like could take so much. And I think it's better now, because people will give you the opportunity to speak and so on. But in the old days, it was pretty tough. I think, as a young man, you're thinking, right, okay, this has happened, everybody's angry, it's going to change, it must change. It changed for a couple of weeks, and there was money brought in, people opened up places where they could try to help people to go and so on, which is, I think, always the response after any kind of disturbance. They give you money, wait till it quells, see if they can arrest the people responsible, quite right, but then it goes back, it slips back, and then what you see is that people take their eye off the ball, people are now depressed, things are happening again, and nothing happens. It kind of goes back to what it was, the money's taken away, and it goes back to as it was before. It's just that at that particular time, I think people needed to support. I think we had at the time, they called it, I think at one of the stages, they brought in the North Peckham Task Force, and they were going to go out and give people training opportunities, get jobs and so on and so on. And they were really good, don't get me wrong. I felt, a lot of people benefited from it. But then as soon as it started working, they took it away. You know, it was like you hand something out that's working and then you pull the rug. And then a lot of people who were expecting to continue to get that support, you know, up and coming, don't get it. And so it's one of those where you then have to look for it again. But I think like areas need constant support. There should always be some sort of training facility to stop people from heading off into crime and other things, you know, because it's just a continuous conveyor belt, isn't it? You know, because I think it costs a lot of money to put people in prison and keep them each week. So I would always say if you're spending that money in advance, you're probably not spending as much. You know, it was tough because I think in the days, you know, people always trying to tell people, oh, drugs didn't affect areas and stuff, and you know, I think when people take drugs and do other things along those lines, it's a difficult space for anybody who doesn't take drugs. And what you've got then is the police coming into conflict with those people, and then you've got, I'd say, young people who, you know, when you haven't got a lot of hope, you don't know where you're going. So with that, you know, conflicting thing telling you, actually, if I do this, I can do this. You know, I can get to a better place because it's in front of you and you see it. But realistically, if you take that route, you're going to go to jail, and there is no opportunity for you to sort of recover from that. Because once you've got a criminal record, you don't usually get the opportunity to work. So it's like one of those self-fulfilling prophecies. The minute you do something that you think will give you a bit of money, you've actually, you know, signed your own card to say that you're not going to get a job later because you've got that criminal record. Yeah, I think there's definitely, it was like, you know, the minorities in sort of like Peckham at the time didn't have a lot. It was never very much. You always had like, you know, to try to find something to do, especially, you know, when youth clubs started closing. You know, Bradfield's has always been there, the Tech's always been there, and that was great. But if you look around, they started taking away Rosemary Gardens. That was a big football pitch where kids, you know, on a Sunday when the Tech's not open, you would go and play football there and meet up with other friends. And then they replaced it with a little pitch. And then so people, you'd use the school. And then they turned the school pitch area into a car park, which was the biggest mistake, you know, that you could have made, because a lot of people used that as an opportunity to sort of like go and play. Then there was a pitch on Sumner Road that was right next to the church. That everybody would be there on a Sunday, you know, community thing again. And then that's been removed. But none of the spaces have been brought back. See, what I look at is when you take a space out, put one in, and let's see another space. But that didn't happen. And what you then see is kids on the corners hanging out on the estates. And, you know, people see what's happening, then they begin to get involved in the stuff that's happening because it's in their faces and it's part of their like upbringing. So